Hi, everybody. Welcome to Active Self-Protection Extra, back again with our favorite former Fed and host of the Ask Podcast, Mike Williver, as well as Terry Johnson, Executive Vice President of Active Self-Protection. We're in the conference room at C2 Tactical.
Hey, I got a promotion.
Yeah, nice.
I'm now Executive Vice President of Active Self-Protection.
Wait, we better start.
Hey, can I get a raise?
Yeah. No, leave it in. Leave it in.
No money.
Leave it in.
There's no money, unfortunately.
So who is he, the Executive Vice President?
He's the Executive Vice President of Firearms Legal Protection, and I apparently need a Snickers bar.
And a nap.
Today, I want to talk. We're back here again with Mike talking about cop stuff and how that applies to us as private citizens. Today, we want to talk about Graham versus Connor and the objective, reasonable standard of evidence and reasonableness. Firearms Legal Protection is who I trust to help me after a use of force incident. If you're a Firearms Legal Protection member, I will also be on your team as a consulting expert, and you can attend our monthly Active Self-Protection training seminars for free. Check out all they offer to their members at the link below. That's a lot of words.
Yeah.
So I'll outline the case just a little bit for all of us, right? Case involved a man who, again, Graham and Connor were on opposite sides here. Graham being the private citizen, Connor being the officer. Graham was having an insulin reaction, ran into a convenience store to buy some OJ for his insulin in a very, oh gosh darn it.
High crime area?
No. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. So Graham ran in to go get some orange juice in a very Steel Magnolias way to deal with his diabetes. Saw that the line was very long and then left very quickly, right? Gets in his car and runs off. Well, Officer Connor saw that, said, wait a minute, that looks like crime is afoot, and pulled him over to see what was going on with crime afoot. Well, then Graham, in some diabetic, low blood sugar kind of way, didn't have any kind of patience for that thing, ends up resisting arrest. We had a big kerfuffle on this, and gets all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court says, at the end of it, well, wait a minute, it's not just about whether or not you subjectively thought something was the case. We must ask, was it objectively reasonable what you believe? And so, Mike, how does that standard, how did that change law enforcement?
Well, for starters, prior to that, I think there was a lot more leeway for cops. You know, generally speaking, people were like, well, the police said it must be true. And that obviously wasn't true. Right. So, For me, I actually really appreciated, this happened before I was a cop, obviously this Supreme Court decision predated my entrance on duty, but for me, I loved having structure. You know, I loved the idea that there was, for me, that it was a very clear, bright line as to what I could and couldn't do. I think this helped professionalize law enforcement in a lot of ways, to where it wasn't just, that guy looks fishy, we go kick him in the, kick him in the whatever. Yeah, and like it's cool. There was an expectation that you would act in a reasonable way. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, this might be the first time they talked about a reasonable officer standard in a Supreme Court case.
I think it is.
This is what set up the reasonable officer.
And I think that, although it took a while, a lot of cops went kicking and screaming, I think it really helped professionalize law enforcement. It was kind of one of the pillars now of, what do you act like as a cop? Like, what do you do? How do you comport yourself in a situation where you're dealing with the public? And while that was a bad outcome in the initial case, the guy was diabetic, he probably wasn't thinking clearly, low blood sugar, he just had to get to some sugar to help this thing, and he was, so I think he acted reasonably in a way.
Sure.
But what the officer saw, his perception, 12 people on a jury would think, okay, that's reasonable. We don't love the outcome, we talk about it on the channel, bad outcome, but it was kind of the only one that we could have.
But it was reasonable.
Right. Yeah, that's where I come from.
So I'm interested on this one because to me it seems like, as opposed to Tennessee versus Garner, which is a law enforcement standard, right?
Yes.
Fleeing felon rule. It seems to me that Graham versus Connor is very similar to what we expect of private citizens.
It is, and one of the things that's kind of interesting here, and Mike touched upon it about, making law enforcement better. I think it moved reasonable suspicion. It kind of separated, in my opinion, reasonable suspicion and probable cause.
Yeah. Oh, these are important for us to talk about.
Yeah.
Tell me about the distinction now.
So reasonable suspicion means, you look at someone and you say, I think this person, they may have committed a crime, or they kind of, well, why do you say that? I'm looking at the way they're dressed. I'm looking at the way they're walking.
Long overcoat in July in Phoenix. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's that crime is afoot.
Yeah.
Not that a specific crime had been committed, but the crime is afoot.
Yeah. Right. But it moved the thinking of, okay, I think something's going on, to, wait a minute, this guy's got a jacket on, but he opens it, or I see a glance, all of a sudden, no, he's got a AR on his side here,
Which in Arizona would not be illegal.
Just Tuesday. That's all.
Yeah.
Just Tuesday.
Yeah. But
in Arizona, that gets you, hey bro, what are you carrying?
Nice.
Yeah.
Who makes your upper?
God's country here, right?
Yeah.
But you see something like that, now I can articulate, why I made the decisions that I made. Because again, it's July, nobody wears a leather jacket in 115-degree weather. And, in this particular state, carrying an AR concealed may not be legal.
Is a crime. I have objective, reasonable evidence of a crime.
Exactly, as opposed to just looking at someone and saying, yeah, I think you're a bad guy. To me, that's what this case completely set up. So the difference between reasonable suspicion, which is a step below probable cause, and once you get the reasonable suspicion, if you can articulate the facts, now you can potentially have probable cause.
Here's one where I think this one gets applied all the time, this difference, this objective, reasonable standard of that a crime has been committed, probable cause, right? Versus I have a reasonable suspicion that crime is afoot. And I'd like to ask you about this one,
okay?
Because we're just going to talk about your average beat cop who is out at night and he sees a dude walk out of the bar and get in his car and start the car and drive off.
Okay.
Now, he might say, gosh, my reasonable suspicion is that guy may very well be drunk because he's just left a bar. It's late at night. I watched him walk out of the bar and get in his car. Now, of course, you might say, you don't know that he's drunk.
Correct.
He could be just perfectly fine. And so the officer can't pull him over because he doesn't have probable cause.
Yeah.
So what does he do?
Oh, well, I mean, I think everyone knows he would follow that person down the road and wait to build the probable cause for the stop. So, swerving in and out of the lane, failing to use a turn signal,
speeding,
not having your lights on, speeding, or even impeding. Frequently with a drunk driver, it's impeding traffic.
Yeah.
They're going 25 and a 40. And then you're building probable cause at that point. Articulable facts you could put together that become probable cause to stop the vehicle. And then you're not done, obviously. You still have to, I think in some states they have to build probable cause to conduct the field sobriety test once they've made contact. But that's neither here nor there. So yeah.
So this is the one that I think that people get behind.
I think what most people don't know is good cops. And I define a good cop as a cop who's not afraid to go out and fight crime, okay? Actual crime that's affecting the community. That's what I'd like to see more cops doing, hopefully. And so, with any luck at all. So
Lord Boone and the Creek don't run.
Yeah, so if you do that long enough, if you're on I was on a task force for years, working with detectives and street cops. If you do that long enough, it doesn't take long. It takes maybe 6 months, a year, before I'm like, scumbag. I just got to figure out what. I got to figure out why. I know he's doing crime.
Why did you point at me when you said scumbag?
I think we all know.
I'm feeling hurt.
But you know what I mean? And so the problem is you get so.
Because you're an attorney.
That's what it is.
Some cops get so good, they become a little overly aggressive. It's like, scumbag, come here, pal.
Right.
No, hold on, pump the brakes. You still got to do your job. Yeah, your radar is really good. Your crook radar is really good, but you still got to slow your roll and come up with, because down the road, all that hard work's going to get tossed out the window. It's when stuff gets suppressed.
And it's not just because you're right, and that's the other part. I mean, you could be right that I'm a scumbag, but again, if there's no probable cause.
Well, you might be a scumbag who's not committing a crime right this minute.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? That's something to keep in mind. But yeah, the dirtbag radar is very real. Any cop worth his or her salt will know that. But you can't. That does not equal a reasonable suspicion or probable cause. However,
Exactly.
So, a hunch is not reasonable suspicion.
Right. Oh, I hate that word so much. I don't know why.
That's not reasonable suspicion.
Correct.
And that's not probable cause. So us as private citizens, again, depending on where you are, right? So in Arizona, you see somebody openly carrying a handgun. That's not a crime. That's
Correct.
not even reasonable suspicion of a crime. Somebody openly carrying a rifle. That's not a crime.
It just depends on where you are.
Yeah, it does depend on where you are and what that looks like. But I think I actually like that Graham versus Connors set that up for our law enforcement because it made a very professional law enforcement force. Do you have objective, reasonable evidence that a crime has probably committed?
Right.
And if you do, then proceed with your investigation.
Or is about to be committed.
Or is about to be committed.
Potentially.
Right.
But if not, well, then don't mess with people.
Right.
Yep. And we as citizens, again, we're not in the business of crime prevention or crime detection. We're in the business of protecting ourselves.
Right.
So if I see someone breaking into a CVS or robbing a CVS and I'm across the street, I need to call Mike.
Yeah.
I need to call the local PD. Me going in all of a sudden trying to play, Mr. Big Shot.
Right.
I don't know
Terrible idea.
I don't know what is truly going on in there. Again, it could be a movie filming, which we've seen happen before. Yeah. It could be somebody, play acting or some kind of training. You don't know, but you're inserting yourself into that situation.
Or it could be a robbery in progress, and you don't know the other two guys that are in that store right now ready to shoot you in the back of the head because you don't know they're there.
Well, and
exactly.
Remember, we had this one on a badge cam, Mike. Yep. The guy that followed a shoplifter out of a store and pointed a gun at him.
Yep.
And ended up getting shot for it because there was an off-duty but uniformed police officer who watched him pull a gun on somebody and said, "That guy, that's an armed robbery."
Right.
Whereas our intrepid concealed carrier was trying to hold a shoplifter at gunpoint, which, friends, is objectively unreasonable.
Not a good idea.
Not a good idea.
It's a property crime.
It's a property crime, and then you are threatening deadly force to stop a property.
Here's the other side of that. I said in another video, the cops get tired of having to explain themselves every 5 minutes. I get if you're a store owner, if you're a store clerk, I totally understand that someone's been shoplifting from your store 8 times a day for the last 2 weeks, and for whatever reason, San Francisco, for whatever reason, they're not getting arrested. Like the corporation set the threshold so high for theft that you're just having to watch a guy walk out with stuff. I get that you're frustrated. That frustration is nothing compared to the nightmare legal battle you're going to have on your hands if you shoot someone over a property crime. Or, God forbid, you get shot by an off-duty cop who sees you and perceives you as the threat. Just another Chris Rock quote. He's popular today. Just because you can do it doesn't mean it's to be done.
Right. That's the correct way. So next week we have one where, actually, believe it or not, so we've had one with Tennessee versus Garner, really applies to cops and lets them do things that we as private citizens really can't. Here, Graham versus Connor, kind of the same. Next week, we're actually going to talk about one that we as private citizens get a much better deal than cops do. Guys, appreciate the insight.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure.